Today, something different. The first of 2 DHI planning guides for the Disney resorts on audio. A trip to the Disney resort in California or Florida has always required planning, but in recent months, it has required more planning with rules that often change from month to month. These are not guides for new visitors, but are guides for people who are familiar with the resorts and would benefit from information about how the parks have changed in recent months. Essentially, these are guides for experienced visitors. On Bandcamp, we will regularly update these audio guides throughout the year, with a goal of having a 30 to 60-minute audio file with the most essential information that will improve your upcoming trip. Ideally, these are reference audio files that you can listen to on a drive or a walk shortly before you visit a resort. On Bandcamp, they are arranged in chapters. In part, individual chapters make this audio guide easier for me to update on a regular basis. I can pull out the chapters that need to be updated without editing the whole project. And in part, individual chapters allow you to find those sections that are the most valuable for your needs. If you already know, for example, where you are eating your meals, you can skip the section on dining. In the audio guides, I also explain the rationale behind certain strategies, so rather than simply offering you a plan to minimize wait times in the parks, I discuss concepts of crowd mitigation that will help you better understand how the parks work and adapt the principles to make your own plans rather than only using the visitor patterns I suggest in the guide. Today we will look at the Disney Resort in California. Later this year, I'll finalize the audio file for the resort in Florida. So hopefully you find these 2 audio guides useful in your enjoyment of the resorts, and you can always find the most recent version of them on Bandcamp, where they will be updated throughout the year. On Bandcamp in the show notes, I'll also include the date when the guide was last updated. Arrival. If you haven't been to the California resort in a while, and if you're traveling by car, you want to leave yourself plenty of time between pulling off the freeway and entering the park. As Disneyland has suspended its old annual pass system and has transitioned over to a new Magic Key reservation system, the overall visitation pattern has changed for their parks. At the moment, there are far fewer pass holders than there have been in decades. Most all guests have hard tickets, good only for a specific day. As such, more guests tend to arrive in the morning and stay until evening, whereas before, when roughly half of the guests were annual pass holders, guests would trickle into the park all day. Even guests with the new Magic Key passes now need to reserve days ahead of time. Because of this, there are typically long lines to enter Mickey and Friends parking in the morning. If you plan to arrive at the park for opening, I would allow 20, perhaps even 30 minutes to move through the parking line. After parking, you'll go through security, presently located at the base of the parking structure, and then you will walk to the entrance plaza along the tram route. This is a 3/4 of a mile walk. There are benches placed along the route if anyone in your party needs to rest. Between security and the walk, I would allow 30 minutes to move from your car to the entrance plaza, perhaps even 40 if you visit on a Saturday or a holiday. The parking lot trams, after 18 months of storage during the pandemic, need repair or replacement. It's unlikely that they will reappear for guest transportation anytime soon. The resort is also struggling with a labor shortage, which affects staffing for additional services like the parking lot tram. The resort is trying to manage operation with a workforce far smaller than they had before the pandemic. In recent weeks, the Disneyland park has had long lines for entrance, as the original Disney park is more popular than Disney's California Adventure, and as it's a larger park, it can accept more guests before it reaches capacity. Disney's California Adventure, or DCA, tends to have shorter lines for park entrance. At both parks, people tend to move slowly through the lines, as many park tickets are on the app, and many guests are unfamiliar with how to find their tickets on the app. One more important thing here. Disneyland, like other businesses, has recently experienced internet outages that have affected their app. If connectivity is down, Disney has allowed guests to enter with a screenshot of their tickets or a printed version of their tickets as well. Internet outages are rare, but it takes only a minute to take a screenshot of your tickets and your reservation number, which, if there's an internet outage, should allow you to enter the park. If you'd like to arrive for park opening, and if you're traveling by car, you should arrive at the Mickey and Friends parking garage at least 75 minutes before park opening for Disneyland, and at least 60 minutes before park opening if you want to enter DCA. This should account for parking, security, walking, and entrance line. If you're walking to the park from a nearby hotel, arriving 45 minutes before opening for Disneyland and 30 minutes for DCA should suffice. COVID requirements and restrictions. Since Disneyland reopened, the resort has changed and then rechanged its mask requirements. As I write this, the mask requirements are fairly uniform across most Disney experiences in the U.S., from cruise ships to Broadway to the Florida resorts to California. It comes down to this: masks are required indoors except when eating or drinking, and must be worn on enclosed public-style transportation such as buses. Outdoors, guests can self-determine if they would like to wear a mask. In California, many counties have indoor mask requirements, including Los Angeles, Ventura, and Santa Barbara, along with much of the Bay Area. Though masks remain a point of contention in the state, many in California are more accustomed to wearing masks than residents in some other parts of the country. In the last few months, I've visited the California parks multiple times, and on each visit I counted masks. Outdoor mask usage is very much tied to levels of infection. In July, when COVID numbers were low, I counted just over 20% of guests choosing to wear masks outdoors. These numbers were slightly higher in densely crowded areas, such as on Main Street for the fireworks. However, in late August, during the upswell of the Delta variant, I repeatedly counted 50% of all guests outdoors voluntarily wearing masks. At times, the number was even over 60%. Inside the Disney parks, mask wearing was being actively enforced inside attraction areas, with typically one cast member standing at the entrance to an indoor queue area, reminding guests to fully mask up. In the downtown Disney shopping area, I've seen guests asked to leave Starbucks and the Lego store for not wearing masks. The one area where I've repeatedly seen inconsistent mask enforcement is in the Disney hotel lobbies. Each time I've walked through the Grand Californian, I've spotted traveling groups without masks. But aside from that, mask enforcement in recent weeks has been fairly robust. Far more so than at the end of spring, when despite mask rules, cast members were letting some things slide due to the low numbers of COVID in the area. The levels of COVID are now much higher than they were at the end of spring. At the moment, Disneyland is operating at a reduced capacity. Though Disney hasn't released the numbers, I've been in the parks on days where all reservation spots were filled. I'd place capacity between 40 and 50%. Even on days where all reservation spots were taken, ride times for most attractions, such as the Mansion and Pirates, never rose much above 45 minutes. Before the recent Delta wave, the Disney plan was to gradually increase capacity over fall to reach full capacity by the end of the year. I suspect, though, that the current health situation has changed that plan. Though in April and May of 2021, the Disney parks in California did have plexiglass barriers on ride vehicles and in some queue areas, these were taken down at the start of summer. Presently, the parks are filling ride vehicles to capacity, which means there are no seats left intentionally open, and at times parties from different traveling groups are being mixed into the same ride vehicle. Over summer, Disney announced that all salaried and non-union cast members were required to be fully vaccinated by the end of September, with the usual clauses for religious and medical exemptions. In August, an agreement was reached with unionized cast members that extends the same requirements to them. New hires now need to be fully vaccinated before beginning their employment. This adds an added layer of protection for guests, particularly in indoor dining locations where guests are allowed to be unmasked. On a personal note here, I felt reasonably safe in the California parks. Each person, of course, has their own level of risk tolerance based on a variety of factors. Your level may be different than mine, and as far as I'm concerned, that's all good. I can tell you a little about my background, which might help you fit into the observations in this section. Everyone at my house is vaccinated with a 2-shot vaccine. Though the vaccine doesn't offer full protection against COVID, it tends to reduce the severity of the infection. In terms of my own personal comfort levels, I'm not endlessly staying at home, nor am I engaging the world in the same way I did in 2019. I'm trying to find some middle ground. I've had fully vaccinated friends who have caught COVID, and this is something I'd like to avoid. At the parks, as a personal choice, I wear a mask outdoors. I've also changed the type of mask I'm wearing at the parks. In recent months, N95 masks have again shown up on Amazon. Many N95 masks are designed for dust, smoke, and other particles. Amazon, though, has sold one type of 3M N95 mask specifically rated for germs, which aligns its use more with biological matter. It has a foam-padded nose clip, which provides a much tighter seal than the type of KN95 masks I was wearing last spring. These masks have full headbands as opposed to earbands. You can find them in packs of 3, 10, 20, and 100 on Amazon. They run just under $2 per mask if you buy a box of 10. Look for 3M Aura. That's AURA respirators. I'd also double-check to see who's selling the masks. This would be one of the very few products on Amazon that I wouldn't buy from a third-party seller. On Amazon, I've seen buyers, and I couldn't tell you how credible these reports are, that report some masks from third-party sellers haven't been genuine 3M masks based on the printed lot numbers. As this is a product designed for personal protection, I have checked to make sure the seller is Amazon.com when I've ordered them. Repeatedly, the masks have been on back order with shipment dates 2 to 4 weeks after ordering. If you're interested, I'll leave a link in the show notes so you can find them easily. Again, I understand masks aren't ideal. Last time I went to the parks with one of my kids, I was deeply aware that we talked less while moving around, largely because it was more difficult to talk and be heard because of the masks. So this mask recommendation is being offered for those of you who might find that a better quality mask leads to a higher felt sense of personal protection and a more enjoyable experience at the park. I'll also add this, as some listeners will be more sensitive to crowds than others. The 2 times where I had second thoughts about the safety of crowds were these. First, the Haunted Mansion stretching room, which is now being filled shoulder to shoulder. And 2, the fireworks on Main Street. There's an easy workaround for the fireworks. They are viewable throughout the park, and the Small World facade has projections as lovely as those on Main Street, with far fewer crowds. In terms of crowd levels, I'll also point out this. Theater-style attractions such as Star Tours and Soaring are presently filling all seats in all rows. If you believe that your day would be more enjoyable without indoor group activity, you can find many attractions that are mostly or even wholly outdoors, such as the Matterhorn, Big Thunder, Grizzly River Run, Autopia, Dumbo's Flying Elephants, the Incredicoaster, and Mater's Junkyard Jamboree. You can also find attractions in which the seating area is so small that traveling parties tend not to be mixed, such as at the Teacups, Peter Pan's Flight, Ariel's Undersea Adventure, and Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin. Again, these elements are a matter of personal choice, but there's a range of options within both parks. For those who would like to experience the parks with very low crowds overall, Disneyland historically has had low visitation on most school days during September, October, and November. The week leading up to Halloween tends to bring in more crowds, as does the week around Thanksgiving, as many California schools are on break for the entire week, which means that vacationing families tend to arrive the weekend before Thanksgiving. Weekdays in January and February are another stretch with low crowds. As for dining, I found the tables reasonably spaced. And aside from the waitstaff, all of whom are wearing masks, no one else will likely approach your table. The Disneyland Resort has a handful of outdoor full-service options, which we'll talk about in the dining section. Lastly, I should point out, so that everyone has full information, according to cast members, Disney has on-site COVID testing for cast members, and similar to most businesses throughout the country, they have seen positive cases among their employees. Again, this is in line with other large businesses in the region. Everyone has their own level of risk and comfort. Yours may be different than mine. I offer these observations so that you have accurate expectations about park experiences as they exist right now, and so you can plan a trip with a realistic understanding of the resort experience as it presently exists. Again, I've visited many times in recent months, and though I've modified how I experience the parks, I've had enjoyable visits each time. Park strategies for Disneyland. In this section, we're using park data to map out paths to minimize your time in line. That is, we'll talk about crowd movement patterns you can use to reduce the time you spend waiting in line to experience an attraction. Instead of mapping out an entire day, we'll focus on specific patterns that will minimize your wait times. These visiting patterns assume that people would like to visit most of the e-ticket attractions. Your traveling group may have reasons to avoid some of these rides. For example, if you're traveling with young children, you may want to avoid the Haunted Mansion or Space Mountain. I'll also explain how these crowd patterns work, so you can adapt these general principles to meet your specific needs. So let's start there. All theme parks try to address crowding by dispersing visitors evenly through the entire park. But the most difficult time to do this at a theme park with a single entrance is at the start of the day. Once guests are in the park, they often, without being aware of their patterns, follow certain visitation sequences. It takes a while for these sequence patterns to move guests away from a central cluster and distribute them throughout the park. The Disneyland map, the Disneyland app, and elements of the Disney Genie service all have components designed to move and evenly distribute guests throughout the park. All of these elements entice guests to explore the parks broadly. The Disneyland app, for example, shows you the wait times for most attractions. From a visitor's point of view, this is helpful, as you can decide if you'd like to visit an attraction based on the wait time. For Americans, the average acceptable wait time is 21.3 minutes. If an average American has a casual interest in going on a ride and the line is less than 21.3 minutes long, that average American will get in line without much thought. If a wait time is more than 21.3 minutes, that average American will need to consider how much they'd like to experience this attraction. But from the industrial engineer's perspective, the posting of wait times on the app is a tool to move guests from high-density areas of the park to low-density areas, thereby more evenly distributing them and minimizing crowding. Still, it takes a while for guests to engage these tools and to migrate from central areas of the park to its peripheries. The start of the day, then, is the most advantageous time to work against crowd distribution patterns and find many attractions with empty or near-empty queues. Some queue areas fill up very quickly, often within minutes of park opening, while others take hours to fill. To break this down into some basic principles, here's what visitors tend to do when entering a theme park with a single entrance. 1. Go to a specific location if they have a plan of what they want to visit. 2. Go to places of visual interest if they don't have a prearranged plan. Or 3. In America, veer right, just as if they were driving, if nothing immediately catches their attention. The suggested visiting patterns in this guide are based on actual wait time data, but in doing so, they tend to counter-program crowd patterns that guide most visitors when they visit the park. To minimize wait times at the start of the day, you should stay away from areas that many people immediately plan for. In Disneyland for families, that would be Fantasyland. Stay away from areas of immediate visual interest. In Disneyland, that would be the Matterhorn. People walk down Main Street, see the Matterhorn, and go there. And stay away from the pattern of veering right. Again, in Disneyland, that would be Tomorrowland. These patterns play out daily in Disneyland. Fantasyland and Tomorrowland are the first areas to attract crowds. Here's our first pattern. Pattern 1. Mornings in the West Side. If you're visiting Disneyland, our morning pattern starts with Galaxy's Edge, the furthest area from the entrance. In Galaxy's Edge, the most popular ride, Rise of the Resistance, has a reservation system, which we cover in another section. But Millennium, Falcon, Smuggler's Run, the other Star Wars attraction in Galaxy's Edge, has a very predictable wait time pattern that is fairly consistent on both weekdays and weekends. For the first 2 hours that the park is open, often from 8 to 10 a.m., the wait time for this ride is under 30 minutes. On weekends and holidays, the wait time will typically cap out in the middle of the day at 60 minutes, and then fall again to under 30 minutes during the last hour the park is open. Assuming you arrive when the park opens or shortly thereafter, Millennium, Falcon, Smuggler's Run would be a good place to start, as it's far from the entrance and outside of the 2 areas that tend to fill quickly. Starting in Galaxy's Edge also sets you up to enjoy other attractions early in the day that tend to have short lines during the first 2 to 3 hours that the park is open. For most of the year, after Smuggler's Run, the next 2 rides to experience would be Splash Mountain and then the Haunted Mansion, which have low lines in the morning. However, if you're visiting between September and December, you should switch the order. Ride Mansion and then Splash Mountain. Between September and December, the Mansion receives a holiday overlay themed to the Nightmare Before Christmas, causing the attraction to attract crowds earlier than usual. For the park's first 2 hours, Splash Mountain typically has a wait time of 10 minutes or less. For the park's first 2 hours, the Mansion typically has a wait time of 20 minutes or less, though this can be higher when the Mansion is dressed for its seasonal overlay. After Splash Mountain and Haunted Mansion, try Pirates of the Caribbean. This attraction typically has a wait time of 20 minutes or less during the first 2.5 hours the park is open. Lastly, after Pirates, head to Big Thunder. During the first 2.5 hours the park is open, even on weekends, wait times tend to be under 30 minutes. If you arrive when the park opens and take this pattern, you should easily experience 5 of the park's most popular rides by mid-morning. You can even include the mini adventures of Winnie the Pooh across the way from Splash Mountain without much danger of missing the low wait times at later rides. With this, you've tackled all of the highly popular rides on the west side of the park in the first 2 to 2.5 hours of your visit. And with these rides experienced, it opens up your day for other adventures at less popular attractions in the early afternoon. From here, you can explore some rides with lower wait times, like the Mark Twain or Tom Sawyer Island or the Treehouse. You can also move very quickly from Big Thunder back to Galaxy's Edge to enjoy shops, character areas, and restaurants. Pattern number 2, mid to late afternoon in Fantasyland. Most attractions are busy in the mid-afternoons, but there tends to be some advantageous offerings in Fantasyland. The Matterhorn, because it's right beside the castle, tends to fill up its queue early in the day and has one of the sharpest rising wait times in the park. Essentially, people walk down Main Street, see the Matterhorn, and then go there. But there is often a mid-afternoon lull at this attraction that happens between 2:30 and 4 p.m. In this window, wait times can be very modest, often 30 minutes or less, even on weekends. This would be a good target time for this attraction, and from experience I've found the actual wait times for this attraction tend to be far lower than the posted wait times. Beyond the Matterhorn, Fantasyland, though busy most all of the day, tends to be less busy between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. This is partially because families with young children either head back to the hotel for a nap or let their kids nap in a stroller during this period. Typically, most Fantasyland rides have lines half as long between 4 and 6 p.m. as they do between noon and 2 p.m. There are, though, 3 exceptions to this. First, Snow White's Enchanted Wish doesn't have much of a late afternoon drop-off as other rides in the area. It was recently updated with some impressive new effects, and adult visitors will wait in line to see what's new inside this attraction, even as they tend to skip most other Fantasyland dark rides. Second, It's a Small World has a seasonal overlay for the winter holidays from late November to early January. Though this attraction does have a typical late afternoon drop-off in attendance, in fact it has one of the highest late afternoon drop-offs in attendance, it has a smaller drop when it has its holiday overlay, again because adult visitors are interested in the holiday decorations. Lastly, Peter Pan's Flight is the most popular ride in Fantasyland. Like other Fantasyland dark rides, it does have that 4 to 6 p.m. drop in wait times, but wait times tend to drop by only 30% rather than by 50%. Again, mid to late afternoon is a period during which all rides are busy in the park, but Fantasyland has a late afternoon reduction in wait times, in part due to napping children, that rides in other areas of the park do not have. Wait times in Fantasyland tend to increase again most days at 6 p.m. after young kids wake from a nap and an early dinner and return to the park. Pattern 3. Early Evening in Adventureland. The Indiana Jones Adventure has wait times that rise much earlier in the day. As it's closer to the park entrance, you'll find wait times typically under 30 minutes for only the first half hour that the park is open. Essentially, as guests move away from the hub, they go on interesting rides as they see them. This is one common visitation pattern for guests with a variable itinerary. Indiana Jones is an extremely popular attraction, also close to the hub. But this ride typically has a lull between 5 and 7 p.m. There's still a wait, but the wait is shorter during the dinner hour. This is a good e-ticket to consider in the early evening. Also in Adventureland, the Jungle Cruise has seen long wait times since it was updated in the summer of 2021. The ride has new scenes, which has driven crowds to its boats. Midday is a terrible time for this ride. It has long lines, often it's hot. Midday is also a terrible time to take photos on this attraction. Morning and evening are much better. The ride has very modest wait times for the first 2 hours the park is open, but then, like other attractions, tends to top out on weekends between 50 and 60 minutes for most of the midday. As with Indiana Jones, Jungle Cruise typically sees a late afternoon lull, so a 5 p.m. ride on Indiana Jones, followed by a 6 p.m. journey on Jungle Cruise, can be a good strategy to move through these two attractions. Also, for those interested in taking photos on the Jungle Cruise, the hour before dusk is one of the best times to photograph the Disney jungle, when the sun is low, adding a little additional color to the scene through evening light. Pattern 4. Tomorrowland at night. Space Mountain, the last roller coaster on our list, is a good end-of-the-day ride. In the morning, the queue fills up quickly. On weekends, by the time the park has been open for just 45 minutes, the queue typically has a 45-minute wait. The problem with walking immediately to Space Mountain the first thing in the morning is that once you're done, you're fairly far from other attractions with low morning wait times. There simply is not an ideal time for Space Mountain to avoid crowds and to arrange it with other attractions. But the ride does typically come down to a 30 to 40-minute wait time during the last hour the park is open. You probably already know this, but if you step into line 1 minute before the park closes, cast members will still let you ride, even if there's a long line. Anyone who is in line before the park closes gets to ride. Park strategies for Disney's California Adventure. Pattern 1. Mornings in Pixar Pier. As with Disneyland, the optimal entry plan for California Adventure involves moving to the back of the park first and then working to the front. The most popular and, in my opinion, the best attraction in the park is Radiator Springs Racers. If you're at the park right at opening, you can quickly move to Cars Land to find a short line for Radiator Springs Racers. But if you enter the park even 15 minutes after opening, you're likely to see lines at this attraction. Unless you're at the park right at opening, a better strategy would be to head to the back of the park to Pixar Pier and work forward. As we talked about earlier, guests tend to cluster at the entrance and then slowly disperse through the park, encouraged by visual marquees, wait times on the Disneyland app, and suggestions on the Genie service. At the back of the park in Pixar Pier, Toy Story Mania during the park's first 2 hours is often near empty. You can ride this attraction multiple times if you like, typically with a wait time of under 5 minutes. Also at the back of the park are the park's 2 roller coasters. The Incredicoaster tends to have very short wait times, often under 10 minutes, for the first hour the park is open. Goofy's Sky School, the Wild Mouse Coaster, has short lines for the first 2 hours as well. If you want to ride each of these attractions once, the order would be Incredicoaster, Toy Story Mania, then Goofy's Sky School. In terms of experiencing other popular attractions, you should plan to reach Soaring within the first 2 hours the park is open, and then Grizzly Rapids Run within the first 2.5 hours, as this ride will become busy as the day warms. With this, you should have experienced 5 of the most popular rides in under 3 hours, or more likely, under 2. Pattern 2. Midday Casual Experiences. At the moment, California Adventure is busiest between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Park hopping doesn't begin until 1 p.m., and far more people leave DCA for Disneyland than leave Disneyland for DCA. In other words, between 1 and 2 p.m., DCA empties out while Disneyland fills up. Because the 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. period is a high point of attendance, this is a good period for low-crowd activities. The Little Mermaid attraction, Mike and Sully to the Rescue, Mickey's PhilharMagic, Animation Academy, and so on. Pattern 3. Mid-afternoon in Avengers Campus and Radiator Springs. Using these patterns, you should have 3 major attractions to experience after 2 p.m. One of these attractions, Web Slingers, like Rise of the Resistance, is managed by a virtual queue, which we'll discuss in another section. But the other 2 are good candidates for the after 2 p.m. lull, while many guests move over to Disneyland. The wait time for Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout is typically half as long at 2 p.m. as it is at noon. Mid-afternoon is typically a good time to also catch various superhero shows and performances in Avengers Campus. After Avengers Campus, go over to Cars Land. Just like Mission Breakout, Radiator Springs Racers has a wait time that is typically 30% shorter at 3:30 in the afternoon than it is at noon. But this is the one attraction at DCA that never really sees a downtime. Unless you're at the park right at opening, the best time to experience this attraction is typically around 3:30 p.m. One of the worst times to experience Radiator Springs Racers is an hour after the park opens, as many families immediately head there, causing some of the longest wait times during the day. And lastly, a quick note about park hopping. Park hopping presently doesn't begin until 1 p.m. If you want to experience attractions in both parks, you'll find lower crowds in Disneyland in the morning, all the way up to 1 p.m., and lower crowds in DCA after 2 p.m. The migration pattern of visitors is skewed toward Disneyland, so later in the day DCA tends to empty out while Disneyland fills up. Disneyland is the more desirable park. If reservations sell out, they almost always sell out first at Disneyland. And Disneyland has more nighttime entertainment, which means that more guests congregate at Disneyland in the evening than at DCA. Virtual queues. At the moment, 2 attractions have virtual queues: Rise of the Resistance at Disneyland and Web Slingers at DCA. Of the 2, Rise of the Resistance is by far the better attraction. Unlike other attractions, both of these require boarding passes. You can only hold one boarding pass at a time. Boarding passes are given out at 7 a.m. and noon via the Disneyland app. Even if you have a park hopper for the 7 a.m. distribution, you can only request a boarding pass for the park you are first entering with your reservation. If you reserved a space at Disneyland, you can request a boarding pass for Rise of the Resistance during the 7 a.m. distribution. If you reserved DCA, you can request Web Slingers at 7 a.m. The system is arranged so that you can only experience each of these attractions once in the same day. If you get a boarding pass for Rise of the Resistance at 7 a.m., you can't request a second one for the same attraction at noon. However, if you get a boarding pass for the 7 a.m. distribution and write it before noon, you can request a boarding pass for Web Slingers if you have a park hopper during the midday distribution. Remember, you can only have one boarding pass at a time, so if you get an afternoon boarding pass at the 7 a.m. distribution, you will not be able to get a second boarding pass that same day. Here's some strategies. If you have a park hopper ticket and want to ride both attractions, you have a much better chance of receiving a boarding pass for and riding Web Slingers before noon than you do for Rise of the Resistance. There's an element of risk here in that you may not receive a boarding pass for Rise of the Resistance during the noon distribution window. And even if you do get a pass for Web Slingers, you might be in a group that rides it in the afternoon. But if your primary goal is to ride both attractions, choosing Web Slingers at 7 a.m. and then Rise of the Resistance at noon will optimize your chances of doing so, and I should point out, you must have a park hopper ticket to do this. If you have a park hopper ticket and have never experienced Rise of the Resistance, I would without hesitation put all of my eggs into one basket and try for Rise of the Resistance at 7 a.m. with the idea that if I didn't receive a boarding pass in the morning distribution, I'd have a second opportunity to try to get one at noon. Rise of the Resistance in every aspect is a superior attraction to Web Slingers. It's easily the most sophisticated and engaging attraction for adults at either Disneyland or Disney World. If you don't receive a boarding pass at 7 a.m., I've found that it's easier to get a pass at noon, as the pool of those hoping to receive a pass at noon is smaller. And remember, to request a boarding pass for Rise of the Resistance at 7 a.m., you need to select Disneyland as the park you plan to visit first. Here are some practical suggestions to optimize your chances of receiving a boarding pass. Open the Disneyland app and familiarize yourself with it long before 7 a.m. Make sure you have an account. Make sure you are signed in. Make sure that all of the people in your traveling party are linked to your account. Set an alarm for 6:55 a.m. so you don't forget to request a boarding pass. For the 7 a.m. distribution, you don't need to be on Disney property. Typically, I pull off the freeway at 6:55, I make sure I have a good cell signal, I exit out of other apps that might also use connectivity in the background, I open the Disneyland app, and on the main screen toward the bottom, I press the button to join a virtual queue. Then I wait. If I happen to be on Disney property, I log off of the Disney Wi-Fi, as at 7 a.m., Disney Wi-Fi tends to be overburdened with guests requesting boarding passes at the same time. Cell service I've found on Disney property tends to work better. 1 second before 7 a.m., I refresh or pull down the virtual queue page. Clicking between the California Adventure and Disneyland tab on the top of the virtual queue page will also refresh the screen. There will be 2 more screens, each with a button you need to click. Both buttons are toward the bottom of the screen. The first screen will ask you to confirm your traveling party. The app will automatically group everyone who is linked to your account who has a valid ticket and reservation for the park selected. This is important. Do not pause to review the names, especially if you are attempting to get a pass for Rise of the Resistance, as passes are typically distributed within seconds. The button at the bottom of the screen confirms your traveling party. Hit it without reading anything else. Then the next screen, if you're lucky, will show your boarding party number and estimated time. There's a Done button to hit on the bottom of this screen as well. The noon distribution is identical, though to be eligible you need to be on Disney property. Also, as there are many attractions and shows to provide distractions, you might set an alarm for 11:55 so you don't miss the noon distribution window. Again, you should turn off the Disney Wi-Fi for this as well. If you have turned on alerts for the Disneyland app, you'll receive an alert when it's your turn to ride the attraction. One final thing to note here. With the 7 a.m. and noon distribution times, Disney prioritizes these boarding passes for traditional tourists. Though Disney has recently started a new type of annual pass system called Magic Keys, the visitation pattern of local pass holders tends towards afternoon and evening visits. By keeping all distribution times early in the day, Disney is then targeting traditional tourists over casual locals. The same holds true for Rise of the Resistance and Remy's Ratatouille Adventure at the Florida Resort. A few things about hotels. One of the major problems facing hotels at the moment, both on Disney property and near Disneyland, concerns staffing, particularly staffing and housekeeping positions. Though pre-pandemic efforts to reduce housekeeping were often tied to environmental concerns, the current issues are mostly a result of a diminished labor pool, particularly in the service areas. In part during the pandemic, many people laid off in service jobs found more reliable work in other labor sectors, and in part, some people in service sectors, particularly those who work in indoor areas, have elected not to return to work while the infection rates remain worrisome. As an extension, you should expect that housekeeping services are somewhat reduced compared to pre-pandemic levels. At Disney's Grand Californian, presently, general hotel rooms receive a light cleaning every other day, which includes the removal of trash, a refresh of towels, a light wipe down of surfaces, and a vacuuming if needed. Housekeeping carts are typically in hallways during morning hours if you need additional towels. You can also call the front desk for extra towels and other amenities. But some of the traditional upkeep of rooms, such as daily bed making, is presently shifted over to guests. Likewise, room service at most hotels is on hiatus. It is possible at the on-property hotels to mobile order from restaurants in downtown Disney to be delivered in your hotel lobby. This is not the same as room service, but considering the labor shortage, it's a reasonable compromise. Restaurant reservations and mobile ordering. In theory, for Disneyland restaurants, you should be able to make reservations 60 days out, but anecdotally, it appears that some restaurants are only accepting reservations a few weeks out. I've tracked Goofy's Kitchen at the Disneyland Hotel, largely because it is not a popular destination and often has day of availability. In other words, this is not a location that typically sells out. For example, today as I write this, it has many reservation slots open for the dinner hour. However, in scrolling forward, you can only find reservation dates for the next 22 days. Extrapolating from this, though some restaurants are taking reservations 60 days out, I'm fairly sure that all restaurants are not taking reservations 60 days out. I suspect this is a supply issue presently. The resort may not want to take dining reservations if there are some supply chain concerns 2 months out. If you can't find reservations you're looking for, check back in a couple of weeks. It's fairly clear that some inventory presently opens up after the 60-day mark, with a number of restaurants appearing to open around 45 days out. You can also use a service such as Mouse Dining that will contact you when a reservation spot opens on your selected day. Mouse Dining has both free and paid options for their service. If you're just looking for one restaurant, you'll be fine with their free option. They cover both the California and the Florida resorts. For both the California and the Florida resorts, no-show dining reservations now come with a $10 per person penalty charge. Reservations need to be canceled the day before to avoid the no-show charge. As a result, a number of previously sold-out restaurants can have a few openings the day or more likely the night before a reservation time. Canceled reservations show up moments after a person cancels them and remain available until they're claimed. So you might check back a few days, the day or the night before your visit, if there's a specific restaurant you want to experience. Lastly, in terms of reservations, if you're looking to experience a sold-out bar such as Oga's Cantina in Galaxy's Edge, you can also check with the host at the entrance. If it's not too crowded, they should be able to accommodate you. Restaurants are able to time out how long it takes most people to eat a meal, but there's more plasticity in bar reservations. Some groups walk in, have a drink, and quickly leave, while others will order food. As a result, particularly on slower days, walk-up accommodations are fairly common at Oga's. Beyond sit-down restaurants, many counter-service restaurants are now linked into mobile ordering through the Disneyland app, from the Hungry Bear restaurant to Stage Door Cafe to the Pym Test Kitchen. My two favorite counter-service locations are Bengal Barbecue, which offers meat on skewers in Adventureland, and Ronto Roasters in Galaxy's Edge, which offers grilled sausage with a peppercorn sauce inside of a pita-style wrap. During peak times on weekends, you may need to place a mobile order an hour or more before you intend to pick it up. And even mid-afternoon, typically a slow period, few counter-service restaurants have immediate pickup times available. Some quick-service restaurants also have walk-up lines, but the wait here during peak days can be long. This, too, is related to a labor shortage. Disneyland simply has far less staff after the pandemic than it did before, and this is most noticeable in hotel and food service areas. So if you'd like to have a meal at a counter-service restaurant inside the park, you should at least order an hour ahead on the app, perhaps even 2 hours on busy days. As the pandemic improves, the labor shortage will likely fix itself, but we are still many months away from that solution. Lastly, if you find that counter-service areas inside the park are full or have long lines at a time that you would like to eat, you can find many reasonably priced options just outside the park in downtown Disney. More than once in recent months, I've left the park to have a light meal at Starbucks in downtown Disney, which Midday tends to have little or no lines. The Starbucks in downtown Disney, as opposed to those in the park, has the same menu in terms of sandwiches and protein boxes as most Starbucks in Southern California. The line at Starbucks in downtown Disney typically has few people in it, while the two Starbucks inside the parks can be swamped with dozens of people. Relatedly, if you just want coffee, it's often quicker to walk to downtown Disney than to wait in line in the Starbucks shop on Main Street. Dining recommendations. As I write this, Disneyland is experiencing a labor shortage, which is particularly noticeable in food service areas. Some restaurants have limited availability, some have limited menus, and with limited kitchen staff, some food offerings simply aren't as good as they were before the pandemic. Even some old standbys, such as the Blue Bayou, despite the lovely atmosphere, haven't been as strong in terms of food over the past few months. I have 2 categories and 4 suggestions that I hope will improve your trip. My largest suggestion is to leave the parks briefly for one meal, perhaps dinner, to create a mental break from the hustle and activity inside of the parks. The food at the Grand Californian overall is better than the food inside the parks, with the exception of Carthy Circle. The Grand California has 3 restaurants, one of which, Napa Rose, is signature dining and probably not right for most families visiting the park. It's more of an event dinner. But the other 2 options are an ideal break from the parks. There's even a back entrance at the Grand Californian that leads directly into DCA. The first, and in my opinion, the better and also less expensive of the 2 options, is the Craftsman Grill. This is an outdoor lounge situated near the hotel pool. It's a comfortable retreat from the activity inside the parks. Entrees hover around $20. I've eaten here many times in the last 3 months. The double-baked nachos are large enough to be a shared item for 4 or more people. The garlic soy chicken wings are excellent, also a large enough serving to be a meal. Among those entrees that I think are particularly good are the lemon sumac salmon salad and the rice bowls. The pizzas, though on the high end in terms of price, are very good as well. Though, for me, food at Disneyland can be hit and miss at different restaurants. Mixed cocktails are always a strong point across property. The Grand Mai Tai here with its aged dark rum is the best drink on the menu. On some nights, the Craftsman features live music as well. Another hideaway at the Grand Californian is the Storytellers Cafe, which is arranged as a buffet. Buffets are more of a staple at the Florida resort than they are in California. But if you're familiar with the Florida resort, in terms of quality and range of food, the Storyteller Cafe is similar to 1900 Park Fare at the Grand Floridian. Highlights on the buffet presently are the roasted salmon with the sherry tomato vinaigrette and the carved ribeye. The salmon is better than the beef. The desserts are another strong area as well. The atmosphere is also very much in line with Disney decor at deluxe hotels in Florida, from the hand-hammered copper overhead vents to the metal cutouts depicting the Gold Rush expansion of California to the autumnal accents in the carpet, wall colors, and paneling. In terms of decor, again alluding to Florida, Storytellers is a West Coast relative of Whispering Canyon Cafe at Wilderness Lodge. As with Craftsman, Storytellers offers a break from the mood of the parks. The space is fully indoors and air-conditioned, but in most every way, from flavors to atmosphere to drinks and even price, I find the offerings at the Craftsman Grill to be better than those at Storytellers. If you had teenage boys in your family who wanted a large meal, Storytellers with its all-you-care-to-eat buffet would be a good choice. Still, the food at both of these restaurants is better than most of the sit-down options in the parks. And as I mentioned before, there's a second park entrance by Grizzly River Run that connects the hotel to DCA. Both restaurants are less than a 2-minute walk from the parks using that entrance. In terms of restaurants in the parks, the best restaurant is Carthy Circle. But as with Napa Rose, this is signature dining and likely more formal than would interest most families spending a day at a theme park. There are two very good lounge restaurants at DCA. The better of the two restaurants for a casual meal is the Lamplight Lounge, which is on Pixar Pier. It has outdoor and indoor seating. With recent concerns over COVID, I realize that outdoor dining is more attractive for some listeners. The three items that I think are particularly good are the Lobster Nachos, which are a shareable plate. Lobster Nachos have been available at this location dating back to its former incarnation as the Cove. In terms of entrees, the pork chop with polenta and green chili sauce is delicious, as is the grilled salmon PLT. It's essentially a BLT with salmon on toasted focaccia. The best cocktail is Nectar in the Rye, which is whiskey, agave nectar, lemon juice, and sherry. The other lounge option is the Carthy Circle Lounge, which is attached to the more formal Carthy Circle restaurant. It offers both indoor and outdoor seating. The Carthy Circle specializes more in light bites, also sundaes. If you enjoyed a large lunch elsewhere, Carthy Circle Lounge would be a good choice for a light dinner outdoors. And to point out drinks one last time, the best drink on the menu is the Carthay Manhattan. If you want something slightly sweeter, they also make a very nice old-fashioned with 2 kinds of bitters. A few final tips. I'm sure that most everyone listening to this guide knows the basics, such as don't try to leave the park immediately after the fireworks, as you'll only find yourself in a 20-minute line to move down Main Street and then a half-hour line to leave the parking garage if you've driven to Disneyland. I've collected here, instead, a few quick tips that I've found useful. With masks, I've found that my throat is a little drier than usual. My first trip back to the parks over a 14-hour period, I bought 5 bottles of water at $4 each. Since then, I've taken a refillable water bottle. There are filtered refilling stations in both parks. They are largely being added as areas are updated. There's a half dozen in Disneyland, including 3 in Galaxy's Edge, but there's only 1 in DCA. It's in Avengers Campus near the ancient sanctum of Doctor Strange. However, you can also refill bottles with water at self-service soda fountains inside of some quick service areas, such as at Pym's Test Kitchen in Avengers Campus and Pizza Planet in Tomorrowland. Personally, I'd rather put $20 toward a nice dinner than spend $20 on water. Next, you can use Photopass whether or not you pay for the service. You just can't download the photos without the watermark unless you pay for the service. To use the service, you'll need to fish out the QR code from the Disneyland app for the Disney photographer to scan. In Florida, this is all handled by Magic Bands. But there's a neat little trick you can use to save time if you have an Apple Watch. You can take a screenshot of the Photopass QR code, edit it down to a photo square that includes only the QR code itself, and then use that photo square to make a photo watch face for your Apple Watch. Apple will place the time over the photo on your watch face, but it will still scan and link your photos to your account. Asking a photographer to scan your watch is a lot easier than fishing out the right page on the app each time you use Photopass. Relatedly, Photopass photographers, if you ask them nicely, will also take your photo with your phone. If you have a Disney Visa card, you have access to 2 unique Photopass locations and free downloads of photos taken there by Disney photographers. Usually, these Visa locations feature characters, but during the pandemic, photos are digitally enhanced with Magic Shot characters. The Visa location in DCA is next to Monsters Incorporated, which is open from 10:30 to 1:30 p.m. The Visa location in Disneyland is in Tomorrowland outside of Star Wars Launch Bay, which is open from 2 to 6 p.m. These times can change, so if you're interested, you might Google Disney Visa perks before visiting. Lastly, if you're coming by downtown Disney for dinner or shopping and park in the downtown Disney lot, not the Mickey and Friends lot, you can have your parking validated for up to 3 hours by making a $20 purchase. Everyone pays for the first hour, which is $10, but a $20 purchase will cover the next 3 hours. Most visitors already know that. But if there's nothing you want to buy, you can purchase a $20 gift card, which qualifies for parking validation. You can get a Disney gift card. I tend to get Lego gift cards and then save them toward Christmas presents for my kids. Legos are a big thing around here. But this allows me to validate parking by purchasing a gift card that I can then use in the future for a purchase I would make anyways. And those are a few tips that I've found useful for this version of the DHI Travel Guide. If you've found this guide useful, we will update it regularly over on Bandcamp with the goal of having an audio guide with current information to help you enjoy the parks. This coming year, there will be changes to the parks and to crowd patterns as the Genie system comes online, as Disney rebuilds their annual pass program, and with other changes that we can't yet see. The best reason to subscribe is to support the work we do here and to keep this podcast going. But on Bandcamp, you'll also find many extras, such as regular updates to the DHI audio travel guides. You can subscribe at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I'll also leave a link in the show notes. Until next time, this is Todd James Pierce.